If we move on now to our next speaker, who is Abolanle Gbadamosi, and she's going to be talking to us about commuting and exercise during commuting and how that affects metabolic risk factors.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Abolanle Gbadamosi, and I'm in the final year of my PhD. I'm currently writing up my thesis around the methodological contribution of commuting, moderate to vigorous physical activity, and its association with metabolic risk factors. Just to give a bit of background, I'm originally from Nigeria, and I came to the UK for my master's and decided to stay back for my PhD. And the topic before us today is commuting moderate to vigorous physical activity. And we know that physical activity is well documented and evidenced to be associated with a better and an improved physical and mental health. And it can be accumulated in different domains, in different areas. So it can be accumulated either in occupation, at work, during leisure, during domestic, or during transportation. And one of the main areas that we'll be looking at, we're focusing on today, is transportation, particularly commuting. Because in commuting is a repeated activity that can occur quite frequently. It's a purposeful type of physical activity, and for those that commute quite actively, it's an opportunity for them to accumulate moderate to vigorous physical activity, even whilst during the commute, for people that probably cycle to work or that commute via brisk walking, or combine one mode of transportation, say public transportation, in combination with walking or cycling. So commuting presents an area that can present an opportunity that can be used to improve physical activity. One of the reasons why people travel is commuting, and is one of the top 3 reasons why people travel. In terms of frequency, it accounts for 15% of trips per person and 20% of total distances traveled. And one of the main modes that is used in commuting is the car. You find that a lot of people travel by car, and while the remaining modes of commute account for just 20%. So walking, cycling, public transport account for about 20%, about less than 20%, and commuting by car accounts for about 64%. So you find a majority of the population commute by car. And in terms of time, commuting takes a substantial amount of time in our day-to-day activity. It absorbs a substantial amount of time, and it can present, like I've said before, an opportunity for us to increase our physical activity, or it can present as an hindrance to healthy lifestyle behavior. So in the UK, for example, the average one-way commute time is 31 minutes. And when you look at, for an example, an active commuter can actually accumulate their recommended physical activity guidelines just within their commute alone. And that's quite interesting to see that just within the domain of commuting, it's possible for you to be quite active. There are various research that have been done in terms of active commuting and how it relates to health outcomes. And some of those researches have come out with quite positive results to say that commuting reduces the risk of certain cardiovascular disease, or a particular type of mode of commute is superior to other modes of commute in terms of like cycling and walking is superior to you driving a car. You probably get more health benefits out of cycling, out of walking, or combining these modes of commute together rather than just driving. And there are some other research that's come out to say that, well, there are disadvantages, but the association is not significant. And commuting has been quantified in different ways. Some research has quantified commuting as time spent in commute. Other ones have quantified commute as just the mode of commute. And then you've seen some research that they've combined total walking, total travel, as part of commute. So when they're reporting commuting, they're not reporting just the time spent in commute, but they're reporting the total time spent in travel. So there are different results, varied results in literature. And so it's one of the reasons why I wanted to look into commuting, to see what exactly are the health benefits that can be accumulated as a result. And now in terms of measuring commuting, there are self-reported measures, there are objective measures such as the use of accelerometer-based devices. And these devices have been used in combination with travel diaries. They've been used in combination with GPS to provide more context to the data. Some examples of the data, some examples of the accelerometer devices are actigraph, activity, and the active power. And all of these devices are validated for measuring step counts, and walking speed. An example with the actigraph, you find that they measure activity in 1 minute epoch, and that wasn't very beneficial because a lot of activities can take place in less than 1 minute, and that might not be captured as a result. But with the active power, you find the active power measuring on a second by second, and you can get that output from the algorithm where you are able to download the second by second event data file. And so some of the main gaps that have been found in literature is a large number of studies report using self-reported measures only, and they just use questionnaires or travel diaries, and there is no objective measure, there is no accelerometer data there to compare with. A lot of studies as well have not captured mixed mode, which is involving more than the use of one mode, and which is quite representative of day-to-day commuting actually, because you find that a lot of people, say for example, a lot of people do not travel to work just by taking the public transport. They've done a particular amount of walking. Some people have combined that with cycling, and you find that that variation in people's commuting, and a lot of that is not captured in commuting studies. And also there isn't comparability between studies that have used accelerometer as a result of the different devices that has been used and the different algorithms for translating the data into meaningful outcomes. And also length of walking bout in terms of compliance has not been really considered in commuting studies. So for this particular study, the aim was to investigate the association between moderate to vigorous physical activity during commuting and metabolic risk factors. And then some of the specific objectives were to quantify MVPA using during commuting using Cadence. Now, Cadence has been suggested as an alternative method of estimating intensity. And with the active file and from the event file that you're able to download from the algorithm, you are able to estimate the cadence of the activities that from the activities of the participant, basically. So in order to define or perfectly quantify MVPA, in this study, I used the cadence to define intensity, as opposed to other previous studies that I've used that has translated counts per minute into intensity. And when you look at that aspect, you find that a lot of regression equations have been developed, and there are a lot of equations there are a lot of values to represent what do you estimate as moderate intensity, what do you estimate as light intensity. There are about 10 to 12 different equations that have been developed to quantify MVPA using just counts per minute. And so that was one of the reasons why I decided to use Cadence. So the method, 40 university staff members were recruited, and they wore the active file for 7 days, and they filled an activity diary. And then commute mode was classified as car, walking, and cycling, then mixed mode. The exposure was the commute time spent in MVPA, and then the outcome, metabolic risk factors. The data was analyzed using SPSS, and some statistical tests were run, the difference tests between the mode of commute and then linear regression to investigate the association. Now, this is what the activity diary looks like. And from the activity diary, you can extract the commute time, to and fro work. And you can also see for a participant that has taken public transport, that has walked or cycled, for the mixed mode commuters, they are able to report that in the activity diary. MVPA in this study was defined as a period of walking with a cadence of at least 100 steps per minute. Now, there have been other definitions like the 76 steps per minute, 109 steps per minute, but for this presentation, I'll be using just the 100 steps per minute. And then metabolic outcomes were also obtained from the participants from a finger prick test, which was carried out after an overnight, 8 hours overnight test. And all of the ranges were taken from well-defined and well-recognized definitions in literature. And the outcomes that I looked at mainly were fasting blood glucose, triglyceride, HDL, waist circumference, and blood pressure, and BMI. Now, this table just gives a brief overview of the demographic and lifestyle factors, some of the results. And from here, we can see that we have, like the Department for Transport data that we saw earlier, a majority of the participants travel by car. We can see that over here, that 19 out of the 40 participants travel by car, 13 use mixed mode, and then we had 2 cyclists and 6 walking commuters. And then we had more female participants than male participants, and the median time spent, travel time was 72 minutes, and then 7 miles for a one-way journey. So people were spending a substantial amount of time just commuting to work. And we also see that the median time spent in walking per day was 113 minutes. 22% of time spent in MVPA was accumulated during commuting, and we found significant differences between the modes of commute and the commute time in MVPA, and also total time in MVPA. We also went on, and we can see that commute mode contribute significantly to total time spent in MVPA. And we can see from here that 22%, considering that 72 minutes out of an entire 24 hours, that's quite significant. And that's quite significant. So in terms of cadence distribution of steps, we decided to look a bit into more detail and to look at the definition we gave earlier about MVPA being a cadence of at least 100 steps per minute, and saw that for steps taken at less than 100 steps per minute, we have a lower number for commute compared to non-commute. If we decide to look at that in terms of percentage distribution, we can see that for steps taken at less than 100 steps per minute, we have just 18% taken during commute, compared to at greater than 100 steps per minute, whereas we have 82% of steps taken at greater than 100 steps per minute. When you look at the other side, which is the non-commute steps, you find out that there isn't that much of a difference between when you are less than 100 steps per minute or greater than 100 steps per minute. The steps during non-commute are known as purposeful as the steps taken during commuting. So you can see that from the distribution here, that a lot of the steps taken were, a lot more of the steps taken during commuting were at higher cadences, and people were working with more purposefulness. If we decide to, I broke that down into a further band of cadence, so from 0 to 10 to greater than 140. And we can see that distribution there, because obviously we have more time in non-commuting period, so we should have more steps. But when we look at it in terms of how much of these steps are we accumulating in these bands, we can see that more steps are accumulated at greater, just like the other charts we just saw, that at greater than 100 steps per minute, we have more commuting steps, and this is as a result of the purposefulness as well. So for higher bands of cadence, you'll be accumulating more steps during commuting, and which is quite an advantage to say that yes, commuting can actually contribute to, and that's significantly different as well, that commuting can actually contribute to total physical activity. And it is significantly different for the steps taking less than 100 steps per minute to 110 steps per minute. They are significantly different from each other. And we We can also go further to look at compliance to physical activity guidelines, and we see that the people that tended to accumulate more moderate to vigorous physical activity were the mixed mode commuters. So these are the people that used more than one mode of commute. And their total contribution to total MVPA was 61%. And out of the 40 participants, we had 24 participants that were compliant. 11 of them were mixed mode commuters. 7 of them were car commuters. 5 of them were walking commuters, and 1 was a cycling commuter. And to just buttress the point about how purposeful commuting steps are, out of the 40 participants, we have 8 participants that were compliant just in their commute, which means that they were accumulating at least 30 minutes of MVPA per day. And that can be summed up as meeting up with the UK recommended guidelines. So commuting presents an opportunity for us to increase our physical activity levels. If we look at this chart, it just buttresses the point I made earlier about the modes of commute. So every mode of commute, car, cycle, mixed mode, walk, they are able to attain at least 30 minutes. So that's the 30 minutes mark there. They are able to attain at least 30 minutes of MVPA per day. But you find very interestingly that the mixed mode commuters are able to achieve that just in their commute alone as a result of probably driving to the train station, taking the train, walking down, or cycling to the train station. As a result of using more than one mode of commute, they are able to combine all of that together. So I'll just quickly round up. In terms of the time spent in MVPA for all modes of commute, we can also see that expansion there, where I've just highlighted to say that the mixed mode commuters and the walking commuters, they are more likely to be they are more likely to accumulate more MVPA than the car commuters. Then in terms of association with metabolic risk factors, there was no significant association between commute time and MVPA in this particular population. And then the only significant result we got was between commute time and triglycerides. And it was a positive statistical significant result. The strength of this research is the use of a validated activity monitoring device, that the active file has been allowed for the quantification of MVPA using event-based analysis of walking. And this is one of the first commuting studies to employ the use of quantifying MVPA in terms of cadence and providing detailed information on cadence distribution. Now, some of the limitations are it's a small sample size and there was no accounting or reporting of indirect trips to work. And then in conclusion, commuting by combining public transport with either walking or cycling can increase amount of MVPA accumulated. Thank you very much. Ooh, sorry about that.
Thank you very much for that, Abola. That was a really interesting presentation. I'm aware we're running over slightly, so there's a couple of questions in the Q&A pane, so maybe you could get around to answering them. I think there's an interesting discussion to be had on the accessibility of active travel, but maybe that's for another time. So, but thank you very much